From the Presidential Palace, Manila, Dateline Malacañang.
Good day. Radio Pilipinas World Service can also be heard on shortwave broadcast through the shortwave facilities of the United States Agency for Global Media, or Voice of America, on the following shortwave frequencies: 15.640 MHz, 17.750 MHz, and 21.720 MHz. I'm your host, Leo Magpayo, and this is Dateline Malacañang. For a brief moment inside the summit halls of Cebu, the tension of a deadly border conflict gave way to a carefully watched handshake. With cameras flashing and regional leaders looking on, Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. stood between Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Manet and Thai Prime Minister Anutin Charnvirakul as the two leaders clasped hands, an image that capped a trilateral meeting aimed at easing their long-running border dispute. The talks, held Thursday on the sidelines of the 48th Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN Summit, marked one of the most visible diplomatic interventions under the Philippines' ASEAN chairship. In a joint press briefing, President Marcos said the dialogue underscored ASEAN's commitment to peaceful dispute resolution, mutual respect, and open communication at a time of heightened regional tensions. The Thailand-Cambodia conflict flared anew in mid-2025 around disputed areas near ancient Khmer temple sites, escalating into clashes involving heavy weapons and airstrikes. Nearly 150 people were killed, while hundreds of thousands were displaced in two major rounds of fighting. The ceasefire brokered during the 47th ASEAN Summit in Kuala Lumpur briefly held, but tensions resurfaced weeks later before another fragile truce was reached. President Marcos said both leaders reaffirmed the need to maintain communication lines, exercise restraint, and avoid actions that could trigger renewed hostilities. The two sides agreed to direct their foreign ministers to sustain dialogue and explore measures to prevent further conflict. The meeting also extended the mandate of the ASEAN Observer Team, or AOT, for another 3 months until July. President Marcos stressed that the Philippines remains committed to facilitating talks as ASEAN works to preserve peace and unity in the region.
This meeting was arranged by the Philippines as a way to provide its good offices in our capacity as chair of ASEAN for 2026 to Cambodia and Thailand in order to provide a meaningful space for constructive dialogue on their bilateral border issues. The Philippines approached this dialogue with utmost respect for both countries, guided by ASEAN's fundamental principles of respect for sovereignty, non-interference, and the peaceful settlement of disputes, as enshrined in the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation in Southeast Asia. As such, I appreciate the trust extended by Prime Minister Han Manet and Prime Minister Anutin to this process. During this meeting, I would venture to say that many subjects have been covered. Some agreements have been reached, and ways forward have been discussed. There were many candid discussions about the border situation between Cambodia and Thailand. Although they have both reaffirmed their importance of maintaining open communication, exercising restraint, avoiding actions that may escalate tensions, and continuing efforts towards peaceful dialogue and constructive engagement. I believe this was possible because of a very clear, fervent belief by both leaders that it is time for peace and no longer the time for war. The Prime Ministers have agreed to task the respective foreign ministers to sustain this open and candid dialogue and to discuss more directly with one another in detail constructive approaches to prevent escalation, foster the conditions for peace and stability, and to safeguard the well-being of their peoples. Complementary to existing bilateral frameworks, the meeting today also affirmed the importance of the continuing role of the ASEAN Observer Team, composed of representatives from ASEAN member states, to observe, to verify, and to report the implementation of all agreements. We welcome as well the extension of the AOT's mandate for another 3 months, which will last until July of this year. The Philippines underscores its commitment to fulfill its obligation as coordinator of the AOT. And so as Cambodia and Thailand continue to work on the situation, the Philippines commits to continue offering its good offices to enable both countries to engage in sustained dialogue and cooperation, especially towards upholding the commitments and principles agreed upon by the two parties. We express our confidence in the ability of both Cambodia and Thailand to resolve the matter amicably and to manage their border differences peacefully in the spirit of ASEAN solidarity and unity.
And Hun Manet expressed gratitude to the Philippines for leading the initiative. Anutin said the path forward requires sincerity and determination. Hun Manet, for his part, commended the Philippines' constructive leadership in promoting regional peace, stability, and unity.
Dateline Malacañang.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. called for deeper regional cooperation and people-centered development as he led the special Brunei Darussalam Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines East Asian Growth Area or BIMP-EAGA Summit in Cebu. Meeting with Brunei Darussalam Sultan Hassan al-Bolkiah, Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto, and Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, President Marcos said regional initiatives must translate into real, measurable improvements for ordinary communities, not just economic targets on paper. President Marcos noted that ongoing programs under the BIMP-EAGA framework continue to generate livelihoods, improve connectivity, and expand opportunities across growth areas in the 4 member economies. The Philippine President urged fellow leaders to sustain momentum and ensure that regional plans lead to long-term gains for future generations. Established in 1994, BIMP-EAGA is a sub-regional initiative designed to accelerate development in less developed and geographically remote areas of Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines through enhanced connectivity, trade, investment, tourism, and infrastructure cooperation. The summit is part of the Philippines' hosting of the 48th Association of Southeast Asian Nations Summit and related meetings.
It is with great honor that I welcome you to Cebu for this special BIMP-EAGA Summit. Your presence today reaffirms our shared commitment to cooperation, partnership, and inclusive growth in this sub-region. As we gather today, we look forward with purpose, guided by the BIMP-EAGA Vision 2035 and its strong alignment with the broader aspirations of ASEAN. This vision is not merely a roadmap for economic integration. It is a promise to our people that development will be meaningful, sustainable, and felt in their daily lives. Today's discussions highlight key milestone programs and projects that are already making a big difference in our communities, creating livelihoods, strengthening connectivity, and expanding opportunities, especially in the sub-region's growth areas. These successes remind us that regional cooperation delivers its greatest value when it uplifts local communities. Let this summit renew our resolve to translate vision into action and plans into lasting impact. Together, let us continue building a more connected, resilient, and prosperous Bimpiaga for present and future generations.
I was Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.
Dateline Malacañang.
Meanwhile, Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. and Vietnamese Prime Minister Le Minh Hong have agreed to establish a long-term rice trade mechanism to ensure stable supply and strengthen food security cooperation between the Philippines and Vietnam. The commitment was reached during their bilateral meeting Thursday on the sidelines of the 48th Association of Southeast Asian Nations or ASEAN Summit in Cebu. Both leaders stressed the need to deepen agricultural cooperation amid continuing regional and global supply challenges. They also discussed expanding joint efforts against transnational crimes, including scam hubs and human trafficking, and boosting tourism exchanges between the two countries. President Marcos congratulated Le Minh Hong on his recent appointment as Prime Minister and welcomed him to his first ASEAN Summit. The two leaders highlighted the significance of the 50th anniversary of Philippines-Vietnam relations, expressing confidence that the milestone would further strengthen trade, economic, and people-to-people ties. Vietnam remains one of the Philippines' top rice suppliers, with Manila relying on imports to help stabilize domestic supply and prices. The bilateral meeting is among several high-level engagements being held alongside the 40th ASEAN Summit hosted by the Philippines.
Dateline Malacañang.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. has expanded the May 6 to 8 holiday declaration to include 2 more cities in Cebu, ensuring smoother operations for the 48th Association of Southeast Asian Nations or ASEAN Summit and related meetings. Under Proclamation Number 1239, signed by Executive Secretary Ralph Recto by authority of the President, Cebu City and Mandaue City are now covered by the special non-working days. The order amends Proclamation 1238 issued on May 4th, which initially applied only to Lapu-Lapu City and the municipality of Cordova. The expanded coverage reflects the two cities' role as key operational hubs and transport corridors for ASEAN delegates. The additional holidays aim to ease traffic flow, bolster security, and ensure uninterrupted coordination of summit-related activities across host areas. The Philippines is hosting the 48th ASEAN Summit under a recalibrated approach, scaling down non-essential activities to manage costs amid global supply pressures linked to tensions in the Middle East. Malacañang earlier announced that around 650 ministerial and senior official meetings for the 48th and 49th ASEAN Summits will be held online instead of face-to-face to streamline preparations while maintaining substantive outcomes. Despite these adjustments, the 48th ASEAN Summit in Cebu on May 8 and 9 will proceed as scheduled, with discussions expected to center on regional energy security, food security, and migrant workers' concerns. The Philippines last hosted the ASEAN Summit in 2017.
Dateline Malacañang.
Philippine First Lady Liza Araneta Marcos is taking a hands-on role in preparations of the Philippines hosting of the 48th Association of Southeast Asian Nations or ASEAN Summit and related meetings in Cebu. In a series of Facebook posts Thursday, the First Lady shared updates on venue inspections, menu tastings, and final checks ahead of the high-level gathering. On Wednesday, Araneta Marcos visited the Ocean Pavilion at Shangri-La Mactan, one of the summit venues. She said the team spent the day reviewing final details, from the setup to the little touches, to ensure a warm, meaningful, and proudly Filipino atmosphere for ASEAN guests. She also joined the menu tasting for the luncheon to be hosted for the spouses of ASEAN leaders, highlighting the blend of Filipino flavors and dishes inspired by other ASEAN cultures. Later that day, the First Lady conducted a final walkthrough at the Mactan Expo, checking the venue layout and cultural performances prepared for the event. She thanked organizers, staff, performers, and volunteers for their work behind the scenes. On Tuesday, Araneta Marcos attended another menu tasting at Cowrie Cove in Shangri-La Mactan, where Southeast Asian leaders will be served dinner. She said the dishes showcase Cebu's local flavors and fresh produce from farmers and fisherfolk. She added that preparations, from venue arrangements to delegation movement, have been carefully coordinated and expressed excitement to share Filipino hospitality with ASEAN guests very soon. The 48th ASEAN Leader Summit officially opens Friday at the newly built Mactan Expo in Lapu-Lapu City. Leaders will hold meetings and a working lunch at the venue before proceeding to Shangri-La Mactan for the retreat session. The first couple will host a gala dinner to cap the summit.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Philippines has reaffirmed its call for stronger global protections for migrant workers at the International Migration Review Forum, or IMRF, in New York, with the Department of Migrant Workers, or DMW, leading the country's delegation. In a media briefing Thursday, Migrant Workers Secretary Hans Leo said the DMW took part in high-level discussions on global migration governance and on the implementation of the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration, or GCM. He noted that Kakdak said the Philippines actively contributed to multiple roundtables and events that shaped the forum's progress declaration. Topics included labor rights and migrant worker protection, remittances and financial literacy, ethical recruitment, regular migration pathways, consular cooperation, and reintegration programs for returning overseas Filipino workers, or OFWs. Kakdak said the Philippines co-chaired one of the roundtable discussions alongside Nigeria, a role that underscored the country's active participation in shaping global policy on safe migration. On the sidelines of the forum, Kakdak met with officials from India and Lithuania to discuss cooperation on labor, migration governance, and broader workforce mobility issues. He said these engagements strengthen partnerships with both labor-sending and labor-receiving countries. The DMW noted that the Philippines and India remain among the world's top labor-sending nations, supplying millions of workers across healthcare, construction, domestic work, and service sectors in the Middle East, North America, and Europe. Kakdak said preparations for the Abu Dhabi dialogue were also discussed during the meeting with India. The Philippines currently chairs the mechanism, which brings together Asian labor-sending countries and Gulf Cooperation Council states. He said discussions with India, the United Arab Emirates, and Saudi Arabia covered upcoming priorities for the dialogue over the next 2 years. Kakdak emphasized that the Abu Dhabi dialogue aligns closely with the GCM, particularly in promoting safe and orderly labor mobility, strengthening migrant worker protections, and improving return and reintegration systems.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Department of Migrant Workers, or DMW, has confirmed that 7 Filipino seafarers were injured after the Malta-flagged container vessel MV San Antonio was hit by a drone attack in the Strait of Hormuz on May 5th. In a briefing at the Ninoy Aquino International Airport, or NAIA Terminal 2 on Thursday, Migrant Workers Secretary Hans Leo Magpayo said the Filipinos were among 8 crew members hurt when the ship was struck by what authorities identified as an Iranian drone, correcting earlier international reports that described the vessel as French-flagged. He stressed that all 7 Filipino crew members survived the blast and have been brought to a hospital for treatment. 4 suffered minor injuries, while 3 are in the intensive care unit with more serious but non-life-threatening injuries. The wounds were caused by burns and gas inhalation from the explosion. Kakdak said the Philippine Embassy, labor officials, and the Migrant Workers Office are closely monitoring the situation and have already spoken with the injured seafarers. He added that Philippine officials will visit them soon in coordination with the host government. Kakdak also reported that more than 1,400 Filipino seafarers have now safely exited the Strait of Hormuz and nearby waters amid escalating regional tensions. He said 4 vessels carrying around 92 Filipino crew members were able to leave the area in the past week. On crew replacement, Kakdak explained that the government initially restricted the deployment of replacement crews in the Persian Gulf at the height of the conflict to avoid leaving Filipino seafarers stranded in high-risk conditions. But with a ceasefire now in place, the policy has been eased.
Dateline Malacañang.
And finally, the Department of Migrant Workers, or DMW, said all 38 Filipino seafarers aboard the cruise ship MV Hondius have tested negative for hantavirus, despite an outbreak on board that has already claimed 3 lives. In a briefing at Ninoy Aquino International Airport, or NAIA Terminal 1 on Thursday, Migrant Workers Secretary Hans Leo Magpayo said the Filipino crew members remain under close monitoring by the Philippine government. Magpayo said the outbreak primarily affected passengers, including 3 who died since the vessel departed Argentina a month ago. Several others have been evacuated and hospitalized. He assured the public that the Philippine government, through the DMW, Department of Foreign Affairs, and Department of Health, or DOH, is coordinating closely with international health authorities, including the World Health Organization, or WHO. Kakdak added that the DMW and DOH are in direct communication with the Filipino crew through the ship's manning agency and owner, and that support is being extended to their families. While some crew members have expressed a desire to return home, Kakdak said repatriation will depend on strict medical clearance procedures in line with global health protocols. The WHO earlier said passengers who contracted hantavirus may have been infected before boarding through human-to-human transmission on the ship cannot be ruled out.
They are okay and the situation on board under the circumstances ay maayos ang sitwasyon nila. Pero yun nga, di ba? Nadanas na rin natin nakaraan nung COVID itong sitwasyon na ganito eh. It is still best for them to be out of that ship and home. But having said that, there are protocols na kailangan din nating i-observe. In the same manner that all the other countries involved here, that the governments of those other nationalities on board will have to observe the proper protocols para hindi kumalat itong virus.
Migrant Workers Secretary Hans Leo Magpayo.
Dateline Malacañang.
Before we conclude our program, Radyo Pilipinas World Service of the Presidential Broadcast Service can be heard over the following shortwave frequencies: 15.640 MHz, 17.750 MHz, and 21.720 MHz. Radyo Pilipinas World Service is also live on audio streaming. Just download Evox PBS Receiver on your Google Play Store or the App Store from your Apple phone. You can also visit our Facebook page and YouTube channel. Just type in and search for Radyo Pilipinas World Service. Kindly subscribe, like, and share our posts as well. And that concludes this edition of Dateline Malacañang. For Radyo Pilipinas World Service, this is Leo Magpayo. Good day and stay safe.
From the Presidential Palace, Manila, Dateline Malacañang.